30 days, Hannah Reed said, staring at the red notice taped to her apartment door, is a polite way of saying they've already decided where we no longer belong. The hallway of Belmore Apartments smelled like old paint, radiator heat, and the lemon cleaner Mrs. Alvarez used every Thursday. Hannah knew which floorboard near 3C clicked, which window leaked during hard rain, and which doors opened before she knocked. Belmore was not beautiful. Its brick had darkened, the elevator groaned between floors, and the front steps leaned enough to make strangers cautious. But it was home, and the red paper looked like an accusation. Relocation offer expires in 30 days. Formal tenancy proceedings may follow. Her mother, Linda, stood behind her with one hand pressed to her chest. Caleb, Hannah's 19-year-old brother, read the notice twice. They can't do this, he said. They bought the building, Hannah replied. Her voice was calm because anger was expensive, and panic was worse. That doesn't mean they own our lives. By 7 that evening, tenants had gathered in the basement community room. Folding chairs formed uneven rows beneath fluorescent lights. A retired teacher named Mr. Wallace held the same notice in both hands. A young mother bounced a sleepy child on her knee. Mrs. Alvarez kept whispering that her rent had never been late in 31 years. Hannah stood beside a corkboard covered with faded flyers, trying to turn fear into questions. Were relocation payments being offered? Had permits been filed? Was the building being condemned, renovated, or demolished? No one had answers. Then the basement door opened and the room fell quiet. Adrian Cole entered without an entourage, yet he carried the stillness of someone accustomed to people making space. He was taller than Hannah expected, dressed in a charcoal suit without a tie. Behind him came Marcus Kane, the company's legal counsel, holding a black folder. Hannah recognized Adrian from business magazines. Founder and chief executive of Cole Urban Holdings. 35 years old. Real estate, shipping, private security, and enough influence to make reporters use words like disciplined, private, and untouchable. In Belmore's basement, he looked like a man inspecting a door he had already paid to open. Mr. Cole, Hannah said, did you come to explain why 43 families have been given 30 days to disappear? Adrian's gaze moved to her, steady and unreadable. No one is being asked to disappear. Then why does every notice end with legal action? Marcus opened his folder, but Adrian lifted one hand, stopping him. The building has been purchased for redevelopment, Adrian said. Work is scheduled to begin in 30 days. That deadline applies to the relocation package, not the notice period required to end a lease. Calling pressure voluntary does not make it decent. The lights flickered once. Hannah heard her mother inhale. Adrian glanced toward Linda, and for a moment something changed in his face. Recognition, perhaps. Or alarm. It vanished quickly. Belmore is unsafe, he said. The electrical system is outdated, the plumbing is failing, and repairs were postponed for years. Then repair it. That is not the plan. Whose plan? Hannah asked. Yours or whoever sent you? Marcus shifted. Adrian did not. You have 30 days to accept the relocation package, Miss Reed. The fact that he knew her name tightened the room around her. That is the only offer this company is willing to make. Hannah stepped closer. Mercy is something people give when they have the right to judge. You bought walls, Mr. Cole. You did not buy the people inside them. Silence settled over the tenants. Adrian studied her as though she had become the one detail he had not expected. The notices stand, he said. Then he left. The meeting broke apart slowly. Caleb wanted to organize a protest. Linda said almost nothing. By the time Hannah returned upstairs, it was close to 10. Rain tapped the hallway windows, and the building seemed to breathe through pipes, vents, and settling wood. She reached for her key, but it would not enter the lock. New hardware. A folded envelope was beneath the doormat. Inside was a replacement key and a card that appeared to come from Cole Urban Holdings, stating that a security upgrade had required replacement of her unit lock. Hannah stared at the key. Someone using Cole Urban Holdings letterhead had changed the lock to her home less than 3 hours after the meeting. She entered cautiously. Nothing looked disturbed. Linda's knitting sat in its basket. Caleb's sneakers were beneath the kitchen table. The photograph of Hannah's father remained on the bookshelf, his smile frozen behind glass. Then Hannah noticed the empty space on the top shelf of the hall closet. A small cedar box had been there since her father died. It held letters, a brass key no one recognized, and photographs Linda refused to discuss. The box was gone. Hannah searched every room, though she knew where it had been. When she returned to the living room, something lay face down on the coffee table. A photograph. She turned it over. A young man and a dark-haired teenager stood on Belmore's front steps sometime around 2005. The young man was her father. The teenager beside him looked about 15, solemn in a coat too large for him. On the back, in her father's handwriting, were 4 words: "Keep Adrian out of this." Hannah looked toward the locked door, listening to the rain and the old building settling around her. Adrian Cole had not bought Belmore because he wanted the land. He had bought it because he had been there before. Hannah did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table until dawn with the photograph beneath the yellow light, studying every detail as if the paper might confess under pressure. Her father looked younger than she had ever known him, his coat open, one hand resting on the shoulder of the dark-haired boy beside him. Adrian Cole could not have been more than 15. Behind them stood the front steps of Belmore, cleaner than, the brass number still bright above the entrance. Linda entered the kitchen at 6:15 and stopped when she saw the photograph. The color left her face so quickly that Hannah no longer needed to ask whether it was real. "Where did you get that?" Linda whispered. "It was on the coffee table after someone took Dad's cedar box." Linda reached for the chair but did not sit. "You need to put that away. I need you to tell me why. Adrian Cole was standing beside Dad 20 years ago. Not here. This is our home." Linda looked toward the wall as though someone might be listening through it. "Not anymore." Caleb appeared in the doorway, still wearing the gray sweatshirt he had slept in. "What is going on?" Hannah turned the photograph over before he could see the message on the back. Linda moved faster than Hannah expected and took it from her. "You will not speak to Adrian Cole about this." Hannah stood. "He changed our lock. Someone entered our apartment. Dad's box is missing. I am already speaking to him." Linda's hand tightened around the photograph. "Your father spent years trying to keep dangerous men away from this family. Then why did he keep a picture of one?" Linda had no answer. Her silence was not empty. It was crowded with years of decisions Hannah had never been allowed to examine. Hannah took the photograph back, slipped it into her bag, and left before her mother could stop her. Cole Urban Holdings occupied the top 12 floors of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Hannah arrived shortly after 9, wearing the navy coat she used for job interviews and court filings. The lobby was all polished stone, quiet music, and people who never seemed uncertain about where they belonged. She gave her name at the reception desk. The woman behind it smiled with professional patience. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Cole?" "No." "Then I can contact his office and request a future time." Hannah placed the photograph on the desk. "Tell him Belmore sent me." The receptionist looked down. Her expression changed by less than an inch, but it was enough. 10 minutes later, Marcus Kane escorted Hannah into a private elevator. "You enjoy creating scenes," he said. "I enjoy answers. Those are not always the same thing. They are when someone steals from my home." Marcus pressed the button for the 42nd floor. "Choose your words carefully. That sounds like advice from someone who is worried about what I might say." The elevator opened into an office with windows on 3 sides. Chicago spread below in gray winter light, the river cutting between steel and stone. Adrian stood near the glass, his jacket removed, his sleeves buttoned at the wrist. He turned when Hannah entered, but his attention went immediately to the photograph in her hand. "Where did you find it?" he asked. "On my coffee table after someone stole my father's cedar box." "I did not take the box. Your company changed my apartment lock." Cole Urban Holdings authorized replacement of the building's exterior entrance locks after a security report. "We did not authorize anyone to enter your apartment or replace its lock. Then someone used your letterhead and left a private photograph on my table." Adrian looked at Marcus. "Leave us." Marcus did not move at first. Then he closed the door behind him. Hannah held up the photograph. "Who was my father to you?" Adrian came closer but stopped several feet away. His name was Daniel Reed. I know my father's name. Then you know more than most people who worked with him. Worked with him doing what? Adrian's gaze shifted toward the back of the photograph. What does it say? Hannah did not answer. That depends on whether I hand it to you or to a reporter. A reporter will publish a mystery and create a tension you do not understand. You gave 43 families 30 days to accept relocation before your company begins formal proceedings. Attention might be useful. Not if it brings the wrong people to Belmore. Hannah watched him carefully. Someone is already watching the building. Adrian's expression became still. What did you see? A black sport utility vehicle across the street last night. A silver sedan this morning. Different cars, same two men. Did they approach you? No. Did you tell anyone else? No. Adrian went to his desk and pressed a button. Marcus, move the resident meeting to tonight. Use the west entrance. Hannah stepped forward. You do not get to issue orders and pretend that explains anything. Your father left something inside Belmore. The cedar box? No, then what? I do not know. She almost laughed. You bought an entire apartment building to search for something you cannot name? I bought it before someone else could. Who? A man named Dominic Shaw. The name meant nothing to her, but Adrian said it with the restraint of someone refusing to reveal fear. He tried to buy Belmore through a redevelopment company called North Lake Renewal. When I outbid him, he sent me a photograph of this building and asked for Daniel's ledger. Why does he want the building? For the same reason I do. Your father hid records there before he died. Records of what? Transactions. Property transfers. Names. Adrian paused. Enough to destroy careers, companies, and families. Hannah thought of Linda warning her not to speak. You knew who I was before you bought Belmore. Yes. You knew my family still lived there. Yes. And you still gave us a 30-day relocation deadline. Because staying may be more dangerous than leaving. Then tell the residents the truth. The truth would make every person in that building a target for pressure, bribery, or surveillance. So you decided for them. I made the decision that kept them alive. Hannah felt anger rise, but she kept her voice level. You keep calling control protection. They are not the same thing. For the first time, Adrian looked away. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Help me search the building records. You know the residents, the maintenance history, and the spaces that do not appear on official plans. In return, no elderly tenant will be removed without replacement housing. No family with children will be forced out before the school term ends, and all moving costs will be covered. That is not enough. What else? The relocation deadline is paused while I work with you. Adrian studied her. For the Reed family only. For every resident. You negotiate like someone with leverage. Hannah placed the photograph on his desk but kept 2 fingers over it. I have proof that you were connected to Belmore long before your company bought it. I also have 43 frightened families willing to speak publicly. That is leverage. The silence between them lasted several seconds. A 14-day pause, Adrian said. 21. 17. 20, and all inspections happen with a resident present. Adrian nodded once. Agreed. That evening, Hannah led Adrian and Marcus into Belmore's basement. The boiler room was warmer than the hallway, and the air smelled of dust, hot metal, and damp concrete. Old maintenance maps hung inside a rusted cabinet. Most matched the current layout, but one showed a narrow storage room behind the west wall that no longer had an entrance. Caleb found a seam beneath 2 layers of paint. They moved a shelving unit and uncovered a section of brick that sounded hollow when Hannah knocked. Near the floor, almost hidden beneath a pipe, someone had carved a name into the mortar. Daniel Reed. Beneath it was a date. Hannah read it twice. Her father had died on October 17, 20 years earlier. The date carved into the wall was October 14, 3 days before his death. Adrian crouched beside the writing, his face unreadable. Hannah looked at him. Someone knew when my father was going to die. Adrian touched the edge of the carving without covering the name. Or your father knew he was running out of time. Hannah stared at the date carved beneath her father's name until the numbers stopped looking like numbers and became a warning. October 14th. 3 days before Daniel Reed died. The basement seemed smaller now, crowded by the sound of the boiler and the weight of everything her mother had refused to say. Caleb stood near the shelving unit with his hands at his sides. Marcus watched the doorway. Adrian remained beside the wall, studying the mortar as though he could read the intention behind every mark. "We open it," Hannah said. Marcus glanced at Adrian. "The structure may be unstable." "Then call someone who can inspect it safely," Hannah replied. "But nobody covers this wall again." Adrian stood. "You heard her." 2 hours later, an emergency structural contractor retained by Cole Urban Holdings arrived with equipment and a copy of Belmore's original plans. He confirmed that the sealed section had once been a service passage connecting the boiler room to an old storage area. The entrance had been closed from the basement side sometime after 2005. By midnight, a narrow opening had been created without damaging the surrounding wall. Cold air moved through it, carrying the smell of dust, old paper, and something faintly smoky. Hannah went in first. Adrian objected, but she ignored him. The passage was only 4 feet wide. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and every step stirred years of gray dust from the concrete floor. At the far end stood a wooden door with no handle. Caleb found a recessed latch near the frame. When Hannah pressed it, the door opened into a room no larger than a walk-in closet. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. Shelves held building ledgers, maintenance reports, tenant lists, and insurance documents. Most of the folders were warped with age. On the opposite wall, someone had marked apartment numbers in black pencil. 2A, 3C, 4B, 6D. Hannah recognized the pattern immediately. "These were families who lived here when I was a child," she said. "The Martins were in 2A. Mrs. Alvarez has always been in 3C. 4B was empty for years." Adrian stepped into the room behind her. 6D belonged to my family." Hannah turned. "You lived here for 11 months. You told me you had been connected to Belmore. You did not say it was your home." "I did not call it home." The answer was cold, but the room seemed to affect him. His gaze stayed fixed on the number 6D, and his voice lost some of its certainty. Hannah opened the nearest cabinet. Inside were copies of rent payments, repair invoices, and handwritten notes. One folder contained newspaper clippings about a fire at Belmore in the fall of 2005. 3 residents had died from smoke exposure after an alarm failed to sound. The official report blamed faulty wiring. Hannah read the names twice. "My mother never told me people died here." "Most residents were encouraged not to discuss it," Adrian said. "Encouraged by whom?" "My father." Caleb looked at him. "Your father owned Belmore?" "Through a holding company." Hannah remembered Adrian saying the building had been purchased before someone else could take it. The truth had been hidden inside the sentence. His family had not discovered Belmore recently. They had returned to it. "What happened in 6D?" she asked. Adrian did not answer at once. "My mother and I were staying there while my father settled a business dispute. On the night of the fire, Linda Reed came upstairs and took me outside." Hannah felt the room shift beneath her. "My mother saved you?" "Yes." "Then why did she look afraid when she saw you?" "Because the fire was not the only secret she carried out of this building." Hannah closed the folder. "You keep giving me half of every truth. Half a truth can still keep someone alive long enough to hear the rest. That is exactly how people like you justify control." Adrian looked at her, and for once he did not challenge the accusation. "You are right." The admission unsettled her more than an argument would have. Caleb moved to another cabinet and pulled open a drawer. Inside was a row of cassette tapes labeled by date. Most had no names. One was marked Daniel Reed, October 14. Hannah reached for it, but Adrian caught the edge of the case first. Neither of them let go. "You knew this might be here," she said. "I suspected there was a recording." "Of my father?" "Of a meeting." "With your father?" Adrian released the case. "Possibly." Hannah found an old tape player on the shelf. It did not work, so Marcus brought one from his car. They carried everything into the community room, where the fluorescent lights made the night feel even later. Linda arrived at 1:30 in the morning. She wore her wool coat over her nightgown and looked furious until she saw the cassette. Then her anger disappeared. You opened the wall, she said. You knew it was there, Hannah replied. Linda lowered herself into a folding chair. Your father told me never to touch it unless Adrian came back. Adrian stood near the far wall. Why me? Linda looked at him for a long moment. Because Daniel believed you would either become your father or destroy everything your father built. Marcus placed the cassette in the player. Hannah pressed the button. Static filled the room, followed by the scrape of a chair. Then Daniel Reed's voice emerged, younger than Hannah remembered and tired in a way that made her chest tighten. He spoke about property transfers, false insurance claims, and names connected to shell companies. No details were complete enough to explain the whole story. Then another man spoke. Adrian recognized the voice immediately. That is my father, he said. The recording continued. Daniel accused Victor Cole of using the Belmore fire to hide missing financial records. Victor denied it and warned Daniel that certain truths did not free families. They buried them. Linda covered her mouth. Caleb stared at the tape player. Hannah did not move. Near the end, Daniel's voice became quieter. If anything happens to me, my family must never know where the final ledger is. There was a pause, then another sentence, spoken so clearly that every person in the room heard it. If Adrian Cole ever returns to Belmore, do not trust him, but do not let him die. The tape clicked off. Nobody spoke. Hannah turned toward Adrian. His face had lost all color. Why would my father say that about you? Adrian looked at the dark cassette window as though the answer might still be turning inside it. Because on the night of the fire, your father learned that Victor considered everyone in 6D expendable. The room remained silent after Adrian spoke, as though Belmore itself had been waiting 2 decades for someone to say the truth aloud. Hannah looked from him to her mother. Linda sat rigidly in the folding chair. Her hands locked together so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. Why would Victor consider his own family expendable? Hannah asked. Linda closed her eyes. Eleanor had discovered that Victor was moving company money through properties like Belmore. She planned a brief electrical interruption so she could enter 6D, remove documents Victor had hidden there, and leave with Adrian before Victor knew what she had done. Victor learned about her plan. He disabled the alarm circuit and used the interruption to conceal the destruction of the financial records in 6D. Eleanor did not know he had changed the plan. Adrian stood near the wall, his expression controlled, but Hannah could see the effort behind it. My mother was the witness, he said. Victor kept the records in 6D because no one would connect a struggling apartment building to the Cole family. Caleb stared at him. And you were there with her? Yes. The man you believed was your father knew that? Adrian did not answer immediately. Victor believed fear created loyalty. He also believed that anyone who knew too much became a liability, including family. Linda stood and walked toward the old cassette player. Daniel uncovered part of Victor's plan and came to Belmore that night to get Eleanor and Adrian out. By the time he reached the 6th floor, the fire had spread beyond 6D. I found Adrian near the stairwell and took him outside. Daniel went back for Eleanor and the records. Did he find her? Hannah asked. No. She had already left through the service passage with the original documents. Adrian looked at Linda. My mother told me she escaped through a rear window. Your mother has lied to you for most of your life, Linda replied. That does not make this easy to hear. Marcus stepped forward. Where is Eleanor Cole now? Adrian's voice hardened. At the family estate in Lake Forest. Linda shook her head. Then she already knows the wall has been opened. Hannah felt a cold pressure settle in her chest. How could she know? Linda looked toward the ceiling. Belmore has never been unwatched. The black sport utility vehicle. The silver sedan. The changed locks. The missing cedar box. Hannah turned to Adrian. You said Dominic Shaw was watching the building. He is. Who else? Adrian did not respond. That pause gave her the answer. Your mother, Hannah said. You knew she might be involved. I knew she had questions about Belmore. That is not what I asked. I did not know whether she was working with Dominic. Hannah stepped closer. But you suspected it. Adrian met her gaze. Yes. And you still let us stay here. I wanted the residents out before either side moved against the building. You wanted us out, But you kept my family in place because you needed me to find what my father hid. I needed someone who knew Belmore. You needed bait. Linda said Hannah's name softly, but Hannah did not look away from Adrian. The truth had finally become simple. The notices, the private meeting, the bargain, the promises of relocation, all of it had been arranged around a secret he had not trusted her enough to reveal. The vehicles outside were not there to watch the building, Hannah said. They were watching me. Adrian's silence confirmed it. I increased security around your family, without telling us why. Because if you knew, you might have left before we found the ledger. That was my decision to make. If you had left, Dominic would have followed. Then you should have told me that too. Adrian took a breath. I believed I could control the risk. Hannah almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. There it is again. Control dressed up as protection. Marcus glanced at the community room door. We should move this discussion somewhere private. No, Hannah said. This is where the residents meet. This is where decisions about their homes should be made. She walked to the table and picked up the cassette. Beside it lay the folders from the hidden room. One contained copies of property transfers. Another listed insurance payments made after the fire. Hannah had noticed a pattern earlier. A series of companies that changed names but shared the same mailing address. She opened the folder and removed 3 pages. Adrian watched her. What are you doing? Making sure you do not become the only person who controls the truth. Those records are incomplete. Then they will encourage someone to find the rest. Hannah, listen to me. I have been listening since you walked into this building. Every answer came after I discovered the question myself. Linda stepped between them. Your father wanted the evidence protected, not published without care. Hannah turned to her. My father also left us inside a lie for 2 decades. The words hurt Linda, but Hannah could not soften them. Not now. Caleb moved beside his sister. Where are we going? Somewhere neither Cole Urban Holdings nor anyone connected to Belmore can enter without permission. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Dominic will search for you. Then I will make certain he has to search in public. You do not understand what these names can do. No, I understand exactly what powerful people do when no one forces them into the light. She placed the cassette in her bag with the copied documents. Adrian moved toward her, then stopped several feet away, as if he had finally understood that coming closer would only prove her point. At least take Marcus with you, he said. No, take a driver. No. Tell me where you are going. No, each refusal stripped something from his authority. For the first time since Hannah had met him, Adrian Cole looked like a man standing outside a locked door. Linda gathered her coat. Caleb picked up the box of family papers they had brought downstairs. Hannah walked toward the exit, but Adrian spoke before she reached it. Your father told you not to let me die. Hannah stopped without turning around. He also told me not to trust you. And which part are you choosing? She looked back at him. Tonight, I am choosing myself. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the sidewalks black and reflective beneath the streetlights. Hannah led her family toward a waiting cab. Across the street, the silver sedan was gone. In its place stood a dark blue car with a woman in the rear seat. She had silver hair, an elegant coat, and the same still gaze as Adrian. The woman lowered the window only an inch and watched Hannah place the bag on her lap. Then Hannah's phone rang from an unknown number. She answered without speaking. A calm female voice said, Your father made the mistake of believing Adrian could become a better man than his blood allowed. Hannah looked directly at the woman across the street. Eleanor Cole, she said. The woman smiled faintly. Keep the cassette, Miss Reed. It is not the evidence that will destroy my son. You are. Hannah kept her eyes on Eleanor Cole until the dark blue car disappeared into traffic, and only then did she realize the woman had never asked what was on the cassette. Eleanor already knew. The recording was not the secret she feared. It was a distraction, something important enough to occupy Adrian while another plan moved forward unseen. Hannah told the cab driver to take them to the offices of the Chicago Housing Defense Network, where her former supervisor, Rachel Bennett, still worked late during emergency cases. Rachel listened without interrupting as Hannah explained the sale, the sealed room, the old fire, and Eleanor's warning. She spent the next hour comparing the copied property records with public corporate filings and city databases. A company called Northlake Renewal had submitted a utility decommissioning request and a vacant building work order. The filing falsely certified that Belmore would be empty and requested staged disconnection of electricity, water, and building alarm monitoring on the day after the relocation offer expired. "This is not demolition paperwork," Rachel said. "This is preparation to make the building look abandoned." Linda leaned over the desk. "Why would anyone need it empty?" Hannah studied the date. It matched the original deadline Adrian had given the residents. "Because nobody is supposed to be inside when something happens to it." Caleb looked at her. "What kind of something?" Hannah did not answer. She no longer needed the exact method to understand the purpose. Belmore contained old records, living witnesses, and a history Eleanor wanted erased. If the residents left quietly, the building could disappear without anyone asking why. If they remained, they could become part of the excuse. Rachel contacted a city inspector, a local news producer, and a housing attorney who could seek an emergency temporary restraining order. Hannah called every Belmore resident whose number she had. She did not tell them to panic. She told them to meet in the community room at 8 the next morning and bring identification, leases, medication, and anything they could not replace. At 7:45, Hannah returned to Belmore. Adrian was waiting on the front steps. He had no driver, no legal team, and no expression she could read. "You spoke to my mother," he said. "She spoke to me. What did she tell you?" "That I am the reason you can be destroyed." Adrian looked toward the upper windows. "She wants you to believe that. I found a permit to shut down every safety system in this building on the final day of the deadline." For the first time, his control broke. Not dramatically, but enough for Hannah to see fear enter the space between them. "Who filed it?" he asked. "Northlake Renewal." Adrian took out his phone. "That company belongs to Dominic Shaw." "Not anymore. It was transferred 6 weeks ago to a trust managed by Eleanor's attorney." Adrian lowered the phone. "She bought Dominic's plan. Or she helped create it." The front door opened behind them, and Mrs. Alvarez called Hannah's name. More residents were gathering inside. Hannah stepped toward the entrance. Adrian caught himself before reaching for her arm. "You cannot keep them here," he said. "I am not keeping anyone anywhere. I am giving them information and letting them choose. The building may not be safe. Then help me make it safe instead of ordering everyone to vanish." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "What do you need?" It was the first time he had asked rather than commanded. Hannah handed him a written list. "Licensed inspectors, temporary transportation, hotel rooms for anyone who chooses to leave, and public confirmation that your company will not enforce the deadline." "Done. Not privately. You say it in front of the residents and the cameras." He glanced toward the street, where a news van had just arrived. "You planned this." "I learned from people who plan everything." Inside the community room, every folding chair was occupied. Hannah stood at the front with Rachel while Adrian remained near the door. She explained what they had found without making promises she could not keep. Some residents wanted to leave immediately. Others refused. Mr. Wallace said he had spent 40 years teaching children not to surrender their rights through fear. Mrs. Alvarez said she would go to her daughter's home, but wanted someone to protect the photographs in her apartment. Hannah wrote down every decision. Nobody was pressured. Nobody was forgotten. Then Adrian stepped forward. "The 30-day relocation deadline is withdrawn," he said. A reporter raised a microphone. "For how long?" "Indefinitely. Cole Urban Holdings will cover temporary housing, transportation, storage, and legal costs for every resident. No lease will be terminated while the city reviews the property." Another reporter asked whether his company had known about the safety shutdown permit. Adrian looked directly into the camera. "My company did not file it. My mother's representatives did." The room changed. Marcus, standing near the rear wall, went completely still. Hannah realized Adrian had just crossed a line his family would never allow him to uncross. His phone began ringing. He silenced it. "I am also releasing internal records connected to Northlake Renewal, the former ownership of Belmore Apartments, and the insurance investigation following the 2005 fire. Linda whispered, "He is giving up the company." Hannah understood that he was giving up more than a title. He was making himself visible to every person whose power depended on silence. The meeting became a controlled evacuation. Families packed essentials while inspectors checked hallways, utility rooms, and fire exits. Adrian carried boxes for elderly residents without calling attention to himself. He did not ask Hannah to forgive him. He did not ask her to trust him. Near sunset, only Hannah, Linda, Caleb, Adrian, Marcus, and the inspection team remained. Rachel returned from the Daily Center with a temporary restraining order signed by a Cook County judge. It prohibited any utility shutdown, demolition, alteration, removal of records, or forced vacancy until the court could review the evidence. For the first time in days, Hannah allowed herself to breathe. Then Caleb called from the hidden room. He had found a loose panel behind the lowest filing cabinet. Inside was a small locked metal case bearing Daniel Reed's initials. A second cassette had been taped to the lid. Beside it, the narrow keyhole matched the unusual brass key Daniel had kept in the missing cedar box. One sentence was written across the cassette in her father's handwriting. Eleanor did not intend the Belmore fire. She was protecting Adrian from the truth about who his father was. Adrian stood across the table, staring at the words. Before anyone could speak, every light in Belmore went out. For 3 seconds, nobody moved and Belmore seemed to disappear around them, leaving only the small red light on Marcus Kane's portable battery. Pack and the sound of rain beginning against the basement windows. Then Hannah heard Adrian say, "This is not a city outage." His voice was calm, but the calm no longer sounded like control. Sounded like a decision. Marcus checked the utility panel while Rachel called the fire department and the city inspector. Caleb switched on 2 flashlights from the emergency supply box. Linda held the metal case against her chest as if Daniel Reed had placed it in her hands only moments earlier. The fraudulent service request was not supposed to take effect for several days, Hannah said. Someone moved the schedule. Adrian looked toward the ceiling. "My mother knows the temporary restraining order was issued. She is trying to make the building useless before investigators secure it." "Then we give them the evidence now," Hannah replied. She placed the second cassette in the battery-powered player. Adrian watched her thumb rest above the button. "Once this is heard, nothing goes back," he said. "Nothing should go back." Hannah pressed play. Her father's voice returned through the static, tired but precise. Daniel explained that Victor Cole had raised Adrian as his son, but Adrian had been born to Victor's older brother, Thomas Cole, the original owner of the family company. Thomas had created a trust that would transfer controlling ownership to Adrian when he became an adult. After Thomas died, Victor stored the original documents in 6D and concealed Adrian's claim. Daniel made certified copies and hid them behind the service room panel. Eleanor learned that Victor intended to keep Adrian dependent, unnamed, and powerless. On the night of the fire, she arranged a brief electrical interruption so she could enter 6D, remove the original trust papers, and leave with Adrian. Victor discovered her plan, disabled the alarm circuit, and used the interruption to destroy financial files while making the incident appear to be faulty wiring. Eleanor did not know he had altered her plan until the fire spread beyond 6D. Daniel then explained that the final ledger was never a single book. He had divided its transaction index among the maintenance ledgers, insurance files, and tenant records in the hidden room, using the cassette dates as the key to reconstruct it. The recording continued with Daniel saying Eleanor had spent years hiding Adrian's identity to protect him, but protection had slowly become possession. She had kept the truth because Adrian's legal claim could destroy the version of the Cole empire she had built beside Victor. Near the end, Daniel addressed Eleanor directly. "You saved your son from one man's control, then taught him that control was the only way to survive. If you love him, tell him the truth before the lie becomes his inheritance." The cassette ended. Adrian stood absolutely still. Hannah could see the teenager in the old photograph beneath the man in the dark suit, someone who had once been let out of Belmore, and then raised inside a story designed by other people. The locked metal case remained on the table between them. A car door closed outside. Moments later, the basement door opened, and Eleanor Cole entered with 2 attorneys and a city official Hannah recognized from the fraudulent filing. The official carried an emergency closure packet. Eleanor had come to have Belmore declared uninhabitable and placed under her representative's control before independent inspectors arrived. One of her attorneys carried Daniel Reed's cedar box and set it on the table. Eleanor carried no umbrella. Rain shone on the shoulders of her coat. Her eyes moved from the cassette player to the locked metal case, then to her son. Hannah placed one hand on the cedar box. "Your investigator entered our apartment." He mistook the box for Daniel's archive and staged the lock change with copied company documents, Eleanor said. The photograph was meant to remind Linda what remaining in Belmore could cost her family. "It was not yours to take," Hannah replied. She opened the cedar box, removed Daniel's brass key, and fitted it into the metal case. Inside was a sealed envelope containing certified copies of Thomas Cole's trust, his acknowledgement of paternity, and a handwritten statement from Eleanor. The documents were old, but the truth inside them was immediate. Marcus read the first page and looked at Adrian. "This gives you legal control of the original holding company." Adrian shook his head. "It gives me proof that everyone around me believed ownership was the same as family." Eleanor looked past Hannah. "You were never supposed to hear Daniel's final recording," she said. Adrian's expression did not change. "That has been the rule of my life, has it not? I was never supposed to hear the part that gave me a choice." Eleanor glanced toward Hannah. "Miss Reed has mistaken exposure for justice. By morning your company will be frozen. Your board will remove you, and every rival you have will know you are vulnerable. Then they will know the truth as well. Truth does not protect people." Hannah stepped between the table and the metal case. "Neither does taking away their choices." Eleanor looked at her with open impatience. "You believe this is about apartments and frightened families. It is about institutions that employ thousands of people." Rachel lifted her phone. "It is also about an illegal utility shutdown, fraudulent filings, and interference with the court order. This conversation is being recorded, and copies of the filings and Daniel's recordings have already been filed with the court and sent to the city inspector, our attorneys, and the news desk." The official beside Eleanor took one step backward. Eleanor's attorneys began speaking quietly to each other. For the first time, the woman who had watched Belmore from a dark car looked uncertain. Adrian picked up the trust documents but did not claim them. He handed them to Rachel. "File everything with the court. Release copies to the Illinois Attorney General's office and the press." Eleanor stared at him. "You would surrender your inheritance for these people?" Adrian looked around the community room, at the folding chairs, the worn bulletin board, and the handwritten list of residents who needed hotel rooms, medication, storage, or transportation. "No," he said. "I am refusing the inheritance you chose for me." Emergency lights appeared through the basement windows as city crews arrived. The power was restored before midnight. Inspectors secured the hidden room, collected the records, and placed Belmore under official protection. Eleanor left through the front entrance without speaking to her son again. 1 year later, Eleanor and several company officers remained subjects of civil and criminal investigations connected to the property transfers, the disabled alarm system, and the fraudulent utility filings. Dominic Shaw entered a cooperation agreement and provided records showing that Eleanor had financed North Lake Renewal's filings after he failed to acquire Belmore. Adrian resigned as chief executive officer and surrendered control of Cole Urban Holdings during the investigation. Before resigning, he placed enough of his personal funds in an irrevocable escrow account, administered by an independent trustee, to honor every relocation promise. He no longer entered rooms expecting obedience. Belmore did not become luxury housing. Under a court-approved settlement, ownership transferred to a resident cooperative. Mrs. Alvarez joined the first board. Mr. Wallace became treasurer. Linda managed the restoration archive, where copies of Daniel's records were preserved instead of hidden. Caleb enrolled in a community college construction program and helped review renovation plans. Hannah became legal director of a new tenant protection organization, operating from an office on Belmore's first floor. On the first morning after the building reopened, she found Adrian standing outside her apartment. He wore no suit, carried no folder, and held no key. The hallway had been repainted, but the old floorboard near 3C still clicked when he shifted his weight. You could have called, Hannah said. I wanted to ask in person. Ask what? Whether there is a place for me in the life that remains. Hannah studied him. He had lost the company, the title, and the certainty that power could solve every problem. What remained was not innocence. It was responsibility, which was harder to carry and impossible to purchase. There are no deadlines anymore, she said. There are no private bargains, no decisions made for me, and no doors you enter without permission. Adrian nodded. I understand. Understanding is not the same as changing. Then I will prove it slowly. Hannah opened the door. Not wide enough to erase the past, but open enough to let hope through. Adrian waited until she stepped aside. Only then did he enter, and for the first time since he bought Belmore, the choice belonged entirely to her.